and update us. So here we are. Welcome, John. Thank you for calling in. Yeah, there we are. There's our favorite John Carpay. So, John,
Testing. Can you hear me okay?
are you there? John, can I just tell one story about you before we let you speak, John? Actually, no.
Is my sound okay, or?
Your sound is good. Can everybody hear him all right? We had an interesting thing happen with John, who's been a dear friend of mine and of our group for, I've forgotten how many years now, John, but as you remember, in I think it was 2018 when you were going to speak in Calgary on the Saturday before our conference. I got a call, and it was turned out it was CBC Calgary, and the lady said, I'd like to speak to the organizer of Freedom Talk, and I said, that's me. She said, I understand you're having a conference this coming weekend. I said, yes, we are. She said, I understand you're having John Carpay speak. I said, yes, we are. And she said, well, you understand he's had some issues with, something to do with social media. I said, I do understand that. And I said, my understanding is that he has it resolved. And she said, well, you're still going to have him come and speak? I said, yes. I said, if I didn't ask anybody who had ever said something, difficult in the past to come and speak, we wouldn't have anybody speaking at our conferences. And so I said, he's a dear friend of ours, and we're going to have him there. And to her credit, she actually reported it quite well. But at 6 o'clock on the Monday morning, Danielle Smith's producer called, and she said that some, activist from the U of A was complaining to her and her company that she shouldn't be having John Carpay on her shows, nor should she be advertising for an organization that was going to let him speak. And so she said, I'd like you to come on at 9 o'clock, and you and this activist from the University of Alberta can talk about it. And I said, well, I'm reasonably good with numbers, but I think when it comes to this, who should speak and who shouldn't speak, I think John Robson's a lot better than I am. So anyway, John went on, and over the course of the show, they debated it, and this fella said, what I've just told you, that she shouldn't even be talking about somebody like John or a group like us who would be so, evil as to host him. So anyway, at the end of her show, she said, well, I've had, she asked the question somewhere through the show, and she said, like, do you think what do you listeners think about, me talking about John Carpay and him speaking at the Freedom School? And so anyway, at the end of the show, she said, we've had 268 texts, and said 266 of them said, we love hearing him, we love hearing you, and we're good for you for doing it. Two people said no. That was fine. That was Monday morning. Tuesday at about noon, I got a call from the general manager of the Port of Call where we were going. She said, well, Danny, I don't want to bother you, but she said, we're a little bit concerned. We've had some complaints about one of your speakers. And I said, John Carpay, by any chance? She said, yes, John Carpay. So I told her what I just told you. It was 2 out of 268. And she said, oh, that makes me feel better. So but just to be sure, we hired some security, which were pretty expensive security. We hired 6 people to be there while John was speaking. When they had some protesters out front. Fortunately, it was 40 below, so the protesters didn't stay long. But in any event, when John was done speaking, we'd had a wonderful event. I said to the security, well, okay, bring us a bill. And they said, well, actually, we've got kids too, and we've got grandkids too, and we like what you're doing. We like what John Carpay is doing. Could we have lunch for the fact that we were here? And we said we did. So we gave them lunch for, pretty significant security. But the point I'm making, John, and you and I have talked about this before, had we backed down, like 2 people would have overruled what 266 people were thinking. And so, John, we really admire you for all the work that you're doing. And I guess you're going to update us on sort of your most recent battle. So welcome, and thank you for all you're doing. And now we'll let you talk, okay?
All right. Well, thanks, Danny. And I appreciate the support, and I think it's important to fight against cancel culture, because it's a toxic cancer that is, destroying our free society. And we have to. Free speech is absolutely essential to debate, and people sometimes choose their words poorly or not as wisely as possible. And I'm really glad to be with you, even though it's not in person. Looking at my clock down here, I think I'll take roughly 25 minutes to update on some of our court actions. And how's the volume there? Is everything good on the technology front? Everybody can hear me okay? I'll take the silence as a yes. Pastor James Coates is still in jail. We had a court ruling yesterday morning, Friday morning. Our application to the Court of Queen's Bench was dismissed. So we're in a situation now where we've got a pastor in jail for not being willing to comply fully with the unscientific and unconstitutional health orders of Dina Hinshaw. And he's already been in jail for more than 2 weeks. And if we don't get him out, he will be in there for another 8 weeks prior to trial scheduled for May 3rd to 5th. So we are contemplating an appeal to the Alberta Court of Appeal. We want to get him out of jail as soon as possible. And the silver lining on the cloud is that at the trial that's coming up in May, the Alberta government, for the first time, will have to produce the science and produce the evidence in support of their lockdown measures. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms requires governments to justify demonstrably any violation of our fundamental freedoms to move, to travel, to associate, to assemble peacefully, to worship. And what this boils down to is we've got charter freedoms that, yes, you can invite your friends over to your own home. You can assume some basic risks, just as we all do. Every time you get into a car, you risk death. And we know now about the COVID virus, what we did not know 12 months ago, that roughly 90% of the population face no significant threat from this virus. And what government should have been doing all along is to protect the vulnerable. If you are 82 years old and in a nursing home and you're already sick with cancer, emphysema, heart disease, diabetes, et cetera, then yes, you are vulnerable. These are the vulnerable people that the politicians have failed to protect. And instead of protecting the vulnerable, the politicians have locked down the entire population. This is the first time in human history that governments have tried to fight a virus by destroying the economy and destroying society and driving millions of people into unemployment and poverty, seeing a massive rise in drug overdoses, seeing people die because their surgery got canceled, seeing people fighting fourth stage cancer because they didn't get their MRI on time or their CT scan. Delayed cancer diagnosis is deadly. We are seeing massive increases in stress and anxiety and depression and mental health problems with children, mental health problems with adults. And it's just not good for us to be living in a state of fear all the time. And this is all being promoted and pushed by the mainstream media, who are in fact the government's pro-lockdown propaganda machine, and they're engaging in just as much fear-mongering as Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw with these PCR case numbers. We are challenging the PCR test in court. It was never designed to diagnose COVID. It does not diagnose accurately. The false positive rates are as high as 90%. And the government is going to have to prove in court in May why they want to rely on a test that is decidedly not the gold standard, and why they keep on using these numbers to put the population into a state of fear and to take all of our rights and freedoms away. Up until now, they've been able to function by way of news conferences and very supportive, biased, pro-lockdown media that do not ask Dina Hinshaw any tough questions. That's what they've been getting away with. But in roughly 2 months' time, the government's going to have to be in court, and they're going to have to explain to the judge why they are using the PCR tests and why they believe that the PCR tests are accurate. The government is going to have to explain why they believe that healthy, asymptomatic people are significant spreaders of this virus. This is another example of a claim that the governments are making. It's a theory that all of us are vile, dangerous disease spreaders, and we need to fear each other and stay 6 feet apart and wear masks and all of this stuff. But we've got medical experts and infectious disease specialists who are going to testify in court that healthy asymptomatic people are not significant spreaders of the virus. And of course, which means that we don't need these lockdowns, because they're not helping. I mean, they're causing a whole lot of harm, but they're not saving any lives. There too, the government will have to prove in court why the government believes that lockdowns are saving lives. All we've been getting in the last 12 months is the claim that these measures are saving lives. It's speculation. In court, you have to back up your speculation with evidence. So we've sued the Alberta government and the Manitoba government, Saskatchewan and Ontario to follow. And we're going to force the governments to actually answer questions. We're going to force the governments to show us the science. I have repeatedly asked Steve Buick, who is the communications person for Health Minister Tyler Shandro, show where is the science that the government relies on for the Alberta government's belief that healthy asymptomatic people are significant spreaders of COVID. Show us the science. And I get no answer. And you know what? That's fine. Come Pastor Coates' trial in May, and of course we want him to get out of jail as soon as possible and not be locked up until that time. But until the trial, when the trial comes in May, the government's going to have to actually show the court and show the Alberta public why they believe that asymptomatic people are spreaders of the virus, why they believe that lockdowns are doing more good than harm, why they believe that the PCR tests are reliable. These are the same questions that the governments of Manitoba and Ontario and Saskatchewan are going to have to answer. So we do have a strong case. I'm not going to make any predictions about the outcome, but I would say this, even if we lose these court cases, it will be a significant victory to have the governments actually be forced to answer questions which in the past 12 months, they are just brushing off and sloughing off and just engaging in fear-mongering. They can try fear-mongering in the courtroom. I'm sure they will try, but they're going to have to back it up with facts and with evidence. In British Columbia, we have just concluded a hearing. The BC government has shut down houses of worship entirely, while of course keeping the big box stores open and the liquor stores and the cannabis stores and even restaurants. You can have people go and eat at a restaurant, but churches, even if they are willing to comply with all of these unscientific measures like social distancing and capacity limits and mask wearing, even churches willing to comply with all of those rules and regulations have been shut down entirely by the BC government. Of interest is that the BC's chief medical officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, did not swear an affidavit in the court action. So she did not make herself available for cross-examination. That tells you a whole lot. In Alberta, to her credit, or to the government's credit, Dina Hinshaw has sworn an affidavit, which has been filed with the courts, and Dina Hinshaw will be cross-examined on her affidavit. And so she's going to have to answer some questions from somebody other than, cheerleading, fawning media. She's going to have to answer some hard questions for a change in the court action. So in BC, the court action is focused on reopening churches so that churches, as a minimum, at least enjoy the same charter rights and freedoms that restaurants enjoy. So we'll wait and see for what the outcome is there. At the federal level, we have taken Trudeau's hotel prison policy to court. This is an absolute disgrace that returning Canadian travelers are being forced to stay in a hotel for up to 3 days and forced to pay $2,000 for that privilege instead of just being allowed to quarantine at home. What we have here at the federal level, it's the same thing as Jason Kenney and the province. Trudeau and the federal government are fear-mongering. They want Canadians to believe that COVID is an unusually deadly killer. But Statistics Canada tells us that the death rates in Canada in 2020 were very much in line with the death rates in 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016. Not what you would expect from an unusually deadly killer, is it? The provincial health data in Alberta tells us the same thing. Something like 2.5%. The number changes a little bit each month, but last time I checked, it was 2.5% of people dying with COVID are people that have no serious comorbidities. So, this tells us a great deal. We know that in Alberta, 75% of the people who are dying with COVID are people that are elderly and very sick. 75% have 3 or more serious health conditions like cancer, heart disease, emphysema, diabetes, etc. So the fact is, what the government data tells us is that COVID-19 has very little impact on life expectancy. And yes, it does shorten the lives of people by 4 months or 8 months or 12 months, but it has no impact on the life expectancy of children, teenagers, youth, young adults. And impact on life expectancy has commonly been the way that you measure how serious a disease is. And the annual flu was killing children ages 0 to 5. COVID is not. So the impact on life expectancy of COVID, the government's data and statistics tells us that COVID is less deadly than the annual flu when it comes to the impact on life expectancy. These are not my opinions. These are facts that anybody can look up, and governments are going to be confronted with these facts in the courtroom by the Justice Centre, and we're going to force them to answer the questions that they should have already been answering in the past 12 months. So on the federal scene, right now in Canada, if you are accused of murder, you have more rights and freedoms than a snowbird coming home from Florida. An accused murderer, first of all, you have to be charged with committing a criminal offense. You cannot be arrested without being first charged. You have a right to call a lawyer. You have a right to have your detention reviewed by a judge or a justice of the peace within 24 hours. You have a right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. You have a right to a fair trial, and people have a right to know where you are. Now, I don't know if this has changed recently with people, being able to book their own hotel, which predictably has turned into another government disaster with people not being able to get through and book a place. But in late January, we had people being taken to secret locations and being told that if they disclosed the location of the prison hotel, that they could face a $15,000 fine. This is on par with repressive regimes, communist regimes, banana republics. Just the worst dictatorships will, excuse me, the worst dictatorships will take you off to a secret location where nobody knows where you are. And it is appalling that there are some Canadians who don't care about this and shrug their shoulders and say, well, those people shouldn't have been traveling in the first place. Excuse me? One of the hallmarks of a free society is that you can enter and leave your own country. It's terrifying how a lot of younger people seem to know nothing about the Cold War and the Soviet Union. But one of the many, many differences between the Soviet Union and communist China, communist Cuba, communist North Korea, and the Poland and Hungary and all of these countries, one of the differences between the East and the free democracies in the West is that in a democracy, you're entitled to leave your own country and come back into your own country. You can come and go because it's not a prison camp. And this is what these communist countries were. They were giant prison camps where you were not allowed to leave. The moment that a country prevents you from leaving, that tells you a whole lot, about how wonderful of a worker's paradise that it is. And so the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms does protect our right to enter and leave Canada, is expressly protected. Now, what we have now is technically you can still leave Canada. However, you've got a severe restriction on your ability to leave Canada, because now you know that when you leave Canada, upon coming back, you're going to have to pay $2,000 and get locked up in a prison hotel for up to 3 days without locks on the doors. We've got women being sexually assaulted. And then we've got the opposition parties in Ottawa, which did not speak out against this massive violation of our charter rights and freedoms until some women were sexually assaulted. Now, I mean, better late than never. I'm glad that the at least one of the federal opposition parties, the Conservatives, finally, once women were being sexually assaulted, they finally said, "Oh, we shouldn't run with this policy." But prior to that, we had the opposition parties in Parliament, to my knowledge, I stand to be corrected, they were not opposed to locking up Canadians for 3 days. And once again, there's no science. Government has not come up with any evidence that would show that international travel has any impact on the deaths of vulnerable seniors in nursing homes, where you have 80% of the COVID deaths are in nursing homes. Government has not shown any link between returning snowbirds and deaths in nursing homes. And my heart goes out to the thousands, probably tens of thousands of airline workers. I'm talking pilots, flight attendants, baggage handlers at airports, all of the janitors and cleaners and administrators at airports, all the stores at airports, thousands of people being thrown into permanent unemployment, and the tourism industry is going to be crushed, obviously. How many Chinese and Japanese and German tourists and tourists and American tourists, how many tourists are going to come to Canada if there's a $2,000 surcharge to pay for the privilege of getting locked up in a hotel that doesn't have locks on the doors, so you risk getting assaulted? I mean, how many tourists are going to come to Canada in 2021? And how many more people are going to be thrown into unemployment in 2021 in the tourism industry? It is just appalling, and I'm sick and tired of these cushy, very comfortable people with cushy public sector jobs making compassionate sounding noises about how hard it must be to be unemployed while they're collecting their full paycheck. If every policeman, every firefighter, every teacher, every provincial government employee, every federal government employee, every municipal government employee, every social worker, if everybody in the public sector had been forced to live on $2,000 per month in CERB benefits since lockdowns were brought down, I don't think support for lockdowns would be all that high. We've got a lot of people that are collecting their full paychecks, and then they tell us this big lie that we're all in this together. We're not all in this together. If you are fortunate enough to be working in the public sector, you've been collecting your full paycheck in the past 12 months. And if you are fortunate enough to work as maybe a lawyer or an accountant or somebody that can get their work done from behind a computer screen, then also you've not had the financial impact. But this has been horrific for people that have died because their surgeries were canceled. This has been horrific for people that have seen their life savings destroyed by lockdowns, that have invested their blood, sweat, and tears and their life savings into a business, only to have it crushed by the likes of Pierre Trudeau and Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw and Doug Ford and the other premiers and the other chief medical officers are destroying people's livelihoods, and it is a wicked and evil thing. And it's time for more people to speak out far more. And in court, the government's going to have to answer for these lockdown harms. It's not going to be good enough to just say, from a news conference, oh, we understand this is really hard on people. Well, okay, that's a good start, but if you really understood how hard it is for people, then you would end the lockdowns. If you're continuing with the lockdowns, you don't really understand how hard this is for people. So we're taking the federal government to court to end this policy of the forcible confinement in hotels. There's no scientific basis for it. There's no evidence that the government has put forward that there's any link between international travel and seniors dying in nursing homes with COVID. There's no link there. The government has not put forward any evidence to show that there was some problem with people quarantining in their own home for 14 days, in respect of which there are already severe penalties for non-compliance with that. So this whole policy is an absolute disgrace. We are looking to hire another 4 lawyers as soon as possible with the Justice Centre. We are going to be expanding our court actions. These are huge court actions. Some of the larger ones against provinces, we need to have 2 or 3 lawyers just on the one file. We've also put we have a brochure called "The Deadly Cost of Lockdown Harms," and I want to see 1 million of those printed and put into the mailboxes of Canadians and being handed out by people. And we're getting requests every day from people saying, well, what can we do? Apart from donating to the Justice Centre, which is extremely important. And I appreciate the very strong public support that makes it possible for us to hire another 4 lawyers, possibly more, we'll see. I appreciate the financial support, and we do issue an official tax receipt. We are a registered charity. No amount is too small. The $50, $100 donations are appreciated just as much as the $500 and $1,000 donations. But in addition to donating, if you want to help out, contact the Justice Centre by info@jccf.ca and ask for a package of brochures, because we're not going to win these battles through court actions alone. That will be my last point. We need to change public opinion. And so I think these brochures are one tool that we have, because unless and until we change public opinion and expose the lies that the politicians are telling us, we're going to be stuck with these horrible charter violating measures for a very long time. So thank you again for having me join you this morning. I know it's almost 11:30 and I'm told that there was question and answer. I'm certainly available for as long as you want me, for up to the next 20 minutes. I'm happy to field any questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. I think we have a half an hour, and there was actually, you got some applause, and then we realized that you couldn't hear us, and so the applause stopped, but it wasn't from the lack of our enthusiasm for what you're saying. And we actually have, John spoke in July in Calgary, I think it was, John, and we have some of your brochures and some of your letters, so we actually have, we'll see that everyone here takes one of your brochures when they leave the room. I think we have enough for pretty much everyone that's here to take a brochure before they go. So thank you very much. We'll start with a question and answer, and we'll just see how this works. So go ahead, Gord. Oh, Gord, why don't we let this questioner come up here, and for the first minute I'll let you speak, and then you, John, you'll see the speaker getting pushed off the stage if they haven't asked a question by then.
Hello, John. Gord Elliott speaking.
Nice to see you, Gord.
If you were familiar with the work of Tony Heller on mask mandates and lockdowns and the effects that they have. He's done terrific work, And in particular, he compares North Dakota and South Dakota, showing that where North Dakota with mask mandates and lockdowns has virtually the same curve as South Dakota does with neither one of those. I think it may well be helpful to your case with Pastor Coates.
Thank you very much. I am blessed with, I get a lot of good emails from a lot of good sources. I feel very frustrated every day by the fact that I'm so busy running the Justice Center, and sadly, I'm able to read only a fraction of the stuff that gets sent to me. But yes, I have heard that the North and South Dakota comparisons show that lockdowns don't do much. We also have the case of Sweden, whose death rates were, similar to, in the same range as other European countries and lower than very locked down countries like Belgium. We also have the comparisons between Florida and New York with somewhat comparable populations. New York is heavily locked down, high death rates. Florida is not locked down, lower death rates. A lot of this goes back to the idea of asymptomatic spread. The governments are operating on the theory that healthy asymptomatic people are dangerous spreaders of the virus. And in court, they're going to have to refute and rebut what our experts are saying, which is that asymptomatic people are not spreaders of the virus. And if we're right, then we don't need social distancing and we don't need masks.
Thank you, John. Next question. It's got to be a question because John's a busy man and we have to be done by 12 because we have fresh buns, John, and we're not going to miss them for you. So
you just took all my time, Danny.
go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, John. Mark Friesen here. And appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing. If it wasn't for the JCCF, I'm not sure where we would be. So thank you very much. My question is, John, I have a lot of support in Saskatchewan to file a lawsuit against the government, specifically in regards to the PCR. Is that something that we should explore independently of the JCCF, or should we wait for the JCCF to file on our behalf? Or does the filings at this point work in our favor in Saskatchewan as well? Okay,
excellent question. The best thing here would be to consult with Marty Moore. Marty Moore is spearheading the Saskatchewan action. We are 90% done with the preparing of the court documents, and Marty has just been run off his feet with running the British Columbia action. But discuss with him directly, because I'm not sure what the best litigation strategy is. Sometimes filing two separate actions can be a great idea. Sometimes it's not the best idea. And a lot of it would depend as well on, who your experts are. Do you have credible medical doctors that have the qualifications to testify in a credible fashion in court about PCR testing? And so please email info@jccf.ca and just say, hello, John and Marty. I'm inquiring about our Saskatchewan action, and let's discuss it in further detail that way.
Hi, John. Martin Brussel here from Athabasca. And I'll start with a brief comment.
No, don't ask the question. Honest to goodness, we're not taking comments. This is the busiest guy in Alberta. Ask him a question or go sit down. Really.
30-second comments, fine. Go ahead.
Ask him a question.
So I've successfully defended myself as a self-rep 3 times a month for 3 years against all allegations by the RCMP, and I completely and absolutely believe in our judiciary, no matter the harms they've done to me. In this leading up to the pastor being jailed, I would think that we could file a lawsuit, class action by the citizens against, say, the Justice General or parts thereof, to have the pastor released. And the other part to that is Section 176 of the Criminal Code makes it a criminal offense to interfere with or obstruct with a clergyman. how do those two apply herein?
Okay. I'll start with the latter part of it. I think it's a disgrace that you've got law enforcement, and with that I would include the RCMP and as well as the provincial health inspectors that seem to be violating express criminal code provisions against disrupting a church service. And I just don't see the need for that. I suppose there could be some legal legitimacy for for some presence some of the time. What a lot of churches have started doing is just locking their doors and saying our church service has commenced. Everybody that was welcome to come, is now inside, and that's the end of that. In terms of the class action lawsuit, and I do get asked that question quite frequently, it depends what you mean by class action. What we have in our court actions is we have multiple plaintiffs. We would have, 4, 6, 8, 10, sometimes even 20 different people. And depending on the court action, that could be small businesses, churches, individuals, and so on and so forth. So we do have class actions in the sense that we have court actions that have multiple applicants. So that's already going ahead. Now, the way that a lawyer would understand a class action would be to sue for damages, where the citizens of a certain group or of a certain class, hence class actions, are going after the government and saying, all of the people that belong to the following class of people, let's say business owners that have lost their life savings or that have been forced into bankruptcy, all of the people are going to sue for damages. Now, there's challenges with that. One of them is that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms does not protect economic interests. So if some government law or policy harms you financially, unfortunately, that does not give rise to a charter claim. If the government violates your freedom of conscience, religion, expression, peaceful assembly, association, and so on, if your rights and freedoms are violated by government, you can launch a charter claim against that law or policy. If a government policy or law or health order harms you financially or economically, the charter is of no use to you. So that's one problem. The second problem is that whenever you sue for damages, whenever you sue for damages, the court action becomes a lot more complicated and lengthy. So what the Justice Centre has always done is we sue for a declaration that a particular law or a health order or government policy is a violation, an unjustified violation of government of charter rights and freedoms. So we go into court and we sue for a declaration. Even that, unfortunately, takes years, typically. Now, if we were to add to that a claim for financial damages, not only is that not backed up by the charter, but it would lengthen and complicate the court action and would take a court action that's already going to take 2 or 3 or 4 years and make it take 4 or 5 or 6 years. So that's why we do not do class actions. Now, if other lawyers are proceeding with class actions, I say, good luck. I wish you well. More power to you. I'm certainly not opposed to it, but it's not something that the Justice Centre does for the reasons that I've explained.
Thank you, John. We've got at least one more question. Even though I'm short on the comments, I'm not trying to cut short the questions because I think this is probably one of the most pressing issues in Alberta right now. So for anyone that's here in the room, or I don't know if anybody at home can they send us in a question if they want to? David, I don't know if our Slido would work to send in a question or not, but if you're at home and you'd like to ask, if you'd like to ask a question, you could email it to paulhimman@gmail.com, isn't it, Paul? I'll let you read the emails. If you have a question, you could email it to paulhimman@gmail.com, and he will ask your question for you. But because I think we're all quite interested in what you have to say, John. So, did your question get answered? Did your question get answered, Bill? Okay, maybe you had a comment and you lost your nerve, did you? But anyway, okay, next question. Come on, Donald.
Good morning. I'm Donald Lee from Peace River, if it matters.
Hey,
Hi, John.
Donald.
My question, John, is about maybe you can clarify this a little bit for me and some other people, maybe not. But one of the things that has really concerned me is that all of our elected legislative bodies all over the world seem to be completely neutered in this. All of these, I don't know if they're laws, if they're decrees, they seem to be coming from bureaucratic tyrants, not from elected legislatures. And our own parliament in Ottawa, our legislature in Edmonton, I don't think they've enacted any of these laws. What has happened with the power in our elected legislative bodies?
That's a fantastic question. And we are going after the governments aggressively on this point. So in our court actions against Alberta, Manitoba, and forthcoming Saskatchewan, as well as in British Columbia, the current court action in British Columbia is focused on reopening churches so that they have at least the same minimal charter rights and freedoms as restaurants. But we are seriously looking at filing a broader action against the British Columbia government that will be similar to our Alberta and Manitoba actions. Now, the charter violations are one big, that's kind of half of the court action. The other half is exactly your point, Don, and that is that to have a province run by a chief medical officer is completely contrary to our Constitution. Our Constitution requires that laws of broad application are enacted by the legislature. Imagine that. Laws that are enacted by the legislature whose members are elected by the people, so that people have, even though there's no direct say, because for the most part we don't have citizens initiative, but at least we have delegated lawmaking where the citizens do have at least an indirect say. This has been tossed out the window for 12 months. Now, it's one thing for the chief medical officer under the Public Health Act to say that sick individuals should be quarantined and that the chief medical officer has some temporary emergency powers that apply to sick people. Fine. That law's been on the books for a long time, and I'm not aware of too many people that are opposed to that. I think that's quite reasonable that you give a public health officer some very limited powers to quarantine sick people. So if you had a situation that some person is sick and contagious, and they say, "I don't care, I'm going to be out and about," well, maybe the government can step in and forcibly, if necessary, can lock up a sick person and say, "You know what, we're going to confine you until your symptoms are gone." That's one thing. But to have a chief medical officer decree that all children in the province shall wear masks, and to have Dina Hinshaw decree that you cannot have your parents come over for Christmas dinner, and to have Dina Hinshaw decree that your business is going to be ruined and forced into bankruptcy, and to have all these laws that apply to the entire population to be decreed by way of news conference for coming on to a year now. March 15th will be 12 months of having our province largely run by an unelected, unaccountable, politically appointed doctor. And it's a disgrace, and it's an affront to democracy, and it is unconstitutional. And we are raising that legal argument in the courtrooms that it is a violation of the Constitution to have this medical dictatorship where you have an unelected, unaccountable doctor that is making laws for the entire population. So I have time. I've got 5 minutes left for one more question.
Thank you, John. Okay, real quick. Go ahead, Doug.
Hi, John. Doug Bebb from Whistler, British Columbia. Thanks for all the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
My question, well, first of all, your cases seem pretty solid to me as a layman. And so is there a chance that the government will not proceed to trial? And second of all, if you do lose in that eventuality, what would be the next steps?
Okay, excellent questions. Well, for the trial of Pastor Coates, May 3rd to 5th, it's not impossible for the government to suddenly withdraw the charges, and the government can effectively cancel the trial that is now scheduled. And if they do that, that will tell you a whole lot about the science and the evidence that the government is supposedly relying on if they're running scared and not willing to put that supposed science and evidence before the judge in May. So there's a possibility of withdrawal of charges, and of course that would cancel the trial, because this is it's trial in I don't know whether it's a trial in provincial court, and on charges of violating public health orders. Sorry, I forgot your second point.
Ron, can you just take he just said if they dropped it, what then? But Paul's got two quick questions. How about, I think you've answered that reasonably well. How about if we just take two quick questions that have come in for Paul, okay? For you.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Paul Himman here. Really appreciate the work you're doing. First one is what about these people that are getting tickets, $1,200 tickets, $500? What do they do? Because that's not a constitutional issue, is it?
It is a constitutional issue. What people should do is plead not guilty and force the government to trial. And certainly it's worth it for a $500 or $1,000 or $1,200 fine. Plead not guilty and contact the Justice Center. I cannot promise that, it's not a 100% guarantee that we can take on your case, but we are doing our best to take on as many ticket cases as possible. I believe currently we have over 100. And for all those cases, we're pleading not guilty, and we're telling the government, you need to set a trial date. And once that trial date is set, we're telling the government, we're going to force you to show us the science. We're going to subpoena the chief medical officer. So get ready for a long trial, and get ready to put all the evidence before the court that these health orders are scientific and that they're not an unjustified violation of our charter freedoms. But do not pay, plead not guilty, and contact the Justice Center.
Thanks. I think this next question is maybe for me, though, but it says to you, how do we ensure that we never live under medical dictatorship again? Is there a legal avenue to this?
Well, the changing public opinion is as important or more important than the court actions. I mean, of course, these court actions are important. If it wasn't for the court actions, the governments could just get away with not answering questions forever, right? They would never have to answer these questions. But if we don't change public opinion, these horrible, harmful, destructive laws are going to be with us for a very long time. So, whether you're using the Justice Center brochure or whether you're working with End Alberta Lockdowns is an example of a good group. They've got good literature, good website. So that's endalbertalockdown.com. Regardless of what organization you're using, get busy and, deliver brochures, put brochures into the mailboxes of your neighbors, and take a stack of brochures and, hand them out on a street corner if necessary, or hand them out at a house of worship or a church or a meeting, hand them out at the office. If you don't get busy to change public opinion, then we're in really, really bad shape. Conversely, if we can change public opinion, we can get rid of these evil laws.
More here, John, that I think it needs to be answered here. And I'm going to try and condense it here. But what about these individuals, the employees? They're going to be forced, whether it's to take vaccine or to take training or to do other type of work. What can they do that they're in a situation where they're being told that you have to take the vaccine or else we're not going to allow you in, or even the fact that we may not be able to travel?
Okay. The Justice Center is not pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. Myself, I'm certainly not an anti-vaxxer. I had my, anti-polio and this and that when I was a baby or a young child. My own kids have had their vaccines. However, we're totally against mandatory vaccinations or compulsory vaccinations. And if it comes to that, and sadly, it looks like we're heading in that direction, refuse the vaccine contact the Justice Center. And if governments are going to push ahead with mandatory vaccines, then the Justice Center will see the government in court, and we will seek to have that stopped. And then again, on that issue, it's the same thing. If we don't change public opinion and get people to let go of their irrational fear of a virus that it poses no significant threat to 90% of the population, if we do not get rid of that fear, then we're very likely to see laws of mandatory vaccinations and forced vaccinations. So again, we have to get busy and change public opinion. It's extremely important. One last question, if it's a quick one, and then I have to run.
We're just going to thank you, John, on putting on my old hat here as the co-chair of the EEA, but we can't thank you enough, John, for the work that you're doing and your organization. And we just encourage everybody to go to jccf.ca and to help them out with donations, contributions to these brochures. But thanks a lot, John, and keep up the great work. We really appreciate it and need it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me with you this morning, and have a great rest of the conference. Next year, hold it in Calgary and I'll come in person. Okay. Have a great day.
Have a nice day. Thanks for joining us. Okay.